Let us open the glass case and listen for the silence between its hinges. Here, in a velvet-lined cradle under tempered glass, rests a single match, short, slender, and entirely still. Its muted hue whispers of cellulose and sulphur, of friction and flame, of human hands and intention distilled. The wood holds the hush of pine forests, long forgotten, and the faint scent of phosphorus clings, like a memory flattened between pages. The whispered glide of a curator's sleeve reveals its simple anatomy, a splintered sliver tipped with promise. Before the match was ever struck, fire was coaxed, slowly, reverently, by flint and fungus, by sparks teased from iron and stone. Our earliest ancestors, lacking accelerants or safety standards, relied upon patience, damp moss, and smoke-scented guesswork. Ignition was a ritual of friction and timing, and the result, flame, was less tool than miracle. Early fire lighting resembled a nervous duet between caveman and chance, often yielding more blisters than brilliance. Among the natural materials that kindled this ancient partnership, fungal tinders, like amadou, played a quiet role. Scraped thin and scorched to softness, it caught embers like a dream catches dust, gently and without fuss. There were also slender twigs steeped in resin, dipped in animal fats, and held aloft like flickering spells. Each early fire was an act of orchestration, a breath, a spark, a prayer, but the match's true genesis did not arrive on windswept plains or within soot-blackened caves. It emerged quietly from chemistry's expanding breath in the parlours and workshops of men whose fingers reeked of sulphur and theory. It was not invented whole, but assembled, accident by accident, a constellation of failed experiments smouldering toward utility. One might say it arrived sideways, like a cat entering a room it already believes it owns. And in this origin, a name returns to us. John Walker, a chemist and pharmacist, not of the forest or the forge, but of 19th century England. He did not set out to shape history, merely to stir substances. He mixed antimony sulfide with potassium chlorate, and upon scraping the result from his mixing stick, he found, by accident, the splutter of fire. Thus, in 1826, the friction match emerged, not with ceremony, but with a sneeze of smoke. It did not roar, it hissed, the faint hush of felt gloves. Walker's invention was crude. Long splints dipped by hand, igniting with more menace than finesse. There was no safety strip, no box to cradle them, only the volatile glee of small combustions. He called them friction lights, and sold them in boxes with sandpaper sides. The flame, however, proved difficult to house. Some versions were ignited by acid, which lived in fragile glass bulbs you crushed between your fingers. Others burst alight too readily, igniting from a jostled pocket or an insult to the air. One design even required the use of a tiny bottle of sulphuric acid carried about one's person, like a gentleman might carry a monocle, except far more flammable and vastly less dignified. These precursors, while valiant, were not yet the match we know, not until phosphorus entered with a certain theatrical inevitability. Phosphorus, elusive and luminous, was isolated in the 17th century by an alchemist boiling vast quantities of urine. It glowed with eerie persistence, like a ghost rehearsing for a better afterlife. The substance crackled and shimmered, and would later become the volatile heart of the modern match. With white phosphorus, matches became reliably ignitable, but also quietly dangerous. Match factories, peopled by women and children, began to suffer from a disease so particular it acquired a name, phossy jaw, a necrosis of the jawbone caused by was as if the match, in granting fire so freely, demanded a piece of the body in return. A soft sigh echoes through the gallery air. Still, demand grew. Matches flickered through cities and countrysides, their glow curling into taverns, drawing rooms, and the solemn mouths of clay pipes. By mid-century, strike anywhere's matches had become common, a name both practical and faintly threatening. One could ignite them upon any rough surface, stone, wall, or shoe sole. They were both fire starter and statement. The machinery of production expanded. Wood was sliced into splints, dipped in chemical slurries, and dried in rooms thick with the scent of combustion yet to be. Matchboxes multiplied, printed with pastoral scenes, military heroes, or silent women staring into middle distance. Each box carried the hum of thousands of tiny flammable intentions, stacked like miniature promises, and the match, though small, became a global fixture. It nestled in every pocket, every drawer, every nervous gesture before a cigarette. It lit lanterns, stoves, and, on occasion, revolutions. The whispered scrape of a matchbox recalls entire decades of whispered rebellion. One could almost measure history in the number of matches struck per hour. The quiet of the gallery deepens now. Notice how the match lies still, its power dormant but unforgotten. Observe the slight curvature in its wood, the tried gleam of its head as if contemplating ignition. It has not been struck, and perhaps never will be, but the possibility of fire remains, hovering like a breath held in reverence. The match waits, not impatiently, but with poise, like a librarian juggling feathers in slow motion. And so, here begins our long exhale through the sulphurous corridors of combustion. We will walk gently. We will not rush. There is still time to consider the factory flaws, the political consequences of spontaneous flame, the substitution of red for white phosphorus, and the laws written to protect the jawbones of workers. The match remains still, unlit, unharmed, beneath its pane of glass. But beyond that hush, its world grew louder. With every passing year of the 19th century, flame became less sacred and more standardized. What once was coaxed from tinder and breath was now summoned with a flick of the wrist, with all the casual authority of a man brushing lint from his coat. The whispered tick of industrial progress echoed like the soft clipping of shears on old cloth. By now, white phosphorus was the flame's cruel accomplice. Reliable, reactive, and alarmingly toxic, it enabled matches to ignite without ceremony, a trait both revolutionary and ruinous. Factories multiplied across Europe, and with them, the slow erosion of worker health. The women who dipped wooden splints into vats of phosphorus did so with aching fingers and hollowing cheeks. In time, their bones glowed faintly under lamplight, not with wonder, but with the quiet rot of phossy jaw. Governments were slow to act, preferring to weigh human teeth against profit margins with bureaucratic carelessness. But the sulphurous breath of reform could not be held forever. By the late 1800s, a softer compound emerged, red phosphorus. It lacked the volatility of its paler cousin and, crucially, did not devour faces. This chemical pivot was not merely scientific, it was ethical. A match that could burn without demanding sacrifice was suddenly possible, like a lion taught to purr. With red phosphorus came the safety match. Its head, now made of potassium chlorate and sulphur, required striking against a surface specially coated with red phosphorus. Separated, the components were inert. Together they whispered flame. This design was not strike anywhere. It was strike somewhere very specific, and this This specificity was its virtue. The faint rasp of a curator's fingernail brushes a matchbox's sanded strip. The Swedes, meticulous and unhurried, took up the cause of the safety match with the quiet fervour of monks illuminating a manuscript. In 1855, Swedish industrialist Gustav Erik Pasch patented the idea, and Johann Edvard Lundström brought it to market. Their factory in Jönköping became a sanctum of splints and science. Production lines moved not with haste, but with deliberation. Each match was born of order, not accident. As the industry scaled, the matchbox itself became a stage. Designs blossomed across its papered faces. Tigers, locomotives, women balancing improbabilities atop their heads. The art was not idle decoration. It served to catch the eye, to anchor a brand, to whisper familiarity across borders. One might call it the first Tinder, though far less disappointing. The soft rustle of old cardboard slides open in memory. In these years, matches became political. Strikes, not of wood, but of labour, spread through factories in Britain and America. In 1888, the London Match Girl strike, led by teenage girls paid starvation wages, brought international attention to the phosphorus peril. They walked out not with slogans, but with scorched fingers and swollen jaws. And they won, eventually. Legislation followed like a reluctant servant. The match was now less menace, more utility, yet even safety has its price. To ensure ignition, manufacturers bathed match heads in dyes and waxes, each chemical chosen for scent, burn rate, and colour. The box evolved in tandem. Some were made of cardboard, others of thin pine. All bore the same essential ritual: the rasp, the pause, the bloom of heat. At the turn of the 20th century, the matchbox had become a pocket companion for the urban wanderer. It shared space with coins, ticket stubs, and the occasional crumpled love note. And like all things held close to the body, it gathered meaning. To light a match was to summon not just flame, but warmth, company, defiance, or escape. It could set a stove, or a novel, or an alibi aflame. The soft pat of a palm pressing into a jacket pocket lingers here. Manufacturing techniques continued to refine. Splints were now machine cut, measured by millimetre, dried in chambers where air moved with a librarian's discretion. Dipping arms, metal and precise, lowered thousands of match heads into chemical baths, rising with the solemnity of cathedral organs. Each batch was tested, sorted, packaged. Faulty matches were discarded or saved for training strikes, a kind of quiet purgatory for wooden exiles. Meanwhile, matchbooks emerged, light, foldable, and eminently printable. Hotels, diners, and political campaigns seized upon them. A blank canvas, they said, that could burn. Advertisements adorned the covers with slogans, addresses, promises. Matches lit cigarettes in war zones, on honeymoon beds, beside confession booths. Each flare illuminated a sliver of human contradiction. The faint flick of cardboard being thumbed open haunts the hallway outside. In the quiet suburbs of the 1950s, matches held their ground. They ignited charcoal grills, birthday candles, and the occasional midlife crisis. A matchbox sat near the telephone, beside the ashtray, in drawers that smelled of cedar and mild regret. The act of striking became ritualized, a sideways drag, a brief inhale, and then the glow, always the glow, like a moth reading a novel in reverse. Even as the lighter emerged, flashier, refillable, impervious to wind, the match retained a certain humility. Its disposability was its charm. One strike, one flame, one vanishing. There was no permanence to it, only the soft ourselves in the century's fold, matchbox in hand, wondering what it means to carry fire so lightly. What does it mean to hold destruction in a sliver of pine and chalky scent? To grant ourselves light, with barely a gesture. Here, in the gallery, the air holds the dry comfort of cellulose. Each box, each splint, carries the echo of 1,000 careful hands. We will trace them further, through war, through branding, through decline. But for now, let us return the match to its place, unstruck, unharmed, a promise still waiting in wood. The match did not vanish when its flame was spent. It remained, blackened, brittle, but not gone. Its presence lingered in ashtrays, in the curls of smoke that clung to sleeves, in the quiet ritual of flick, burn and drop. The object burned quickly, but its presence was oddly patient, like a letter opened, read, and never quite thrown away. We now step gently into the era where matches became monuments of habit. Their ubiquity was nearly invisible, precisely because they were everywhere. Drawers held them without ceremony. Jacket pockets welcomed them like loose change. And restaurants, ever eager for a reason to be remembered, pressed their names onto matchbooks with the confidence of poets. By mid-century, the printed matchbook had become its own miniature billboard. Hotel chains, bowling alleys, and cruise lines vied for elegance in 2 inches of cardstock. The matchbook was not only portable, it was intimate. It entered homes, purses, and glove compartments. It rested near phones and under bedside lamps, and it carried fire folded in advertising, like a secret smuggled inside a business card. One might have thought the match had reached its peak, but war would shape it further. During both world wars, matches were distributed as military essentials. Waterproof variants were developed for soldiers in damp trenches and naval vessels. Some boxes were printed with camouflage, others bore instructions, such as how to identify enemy uniforms or signal for rescue. A flick of fire, yes, but also a flicker of strategy, and here too matches became symbols. A soldier, lighting a cigarette in the dark, was not merely inhaling. He was defying death with borrowed fire. A match lit in the right moment could signal victory, longing, or warning. The gallery air shifts, touched faintly by the ghost of gunpowder and damp wool. Mass production accelerated. Factories in Eastern Europe and South Asia began to produce matches at astonishing volumes, millions per hour. Wood was sliced with humming blades. Chemicals were balanced like recipes for soft destruction. In India, the match industry flourished, with regional brands boasting vivid box art, elephants, tigers, temples. The artwork was not only decorative, it told stories, indicated origin, and, in some cases, replaced literacy. To recognise a brand was to recognise a tiger's stride or a lotus in bloom, like a librarian filing memories by scent. Matches became part of the informal economy, sold in bundles at intersections tucked into markets. They were carried in shirt pockets by fruit vendors and poets alike. To strike a match was not always to smoke. Sometimes it was to cook, to warm, to see. As the 20th century wore on, the match became entangled in entertainment and protest alike. It lit candles at vigils and pyres at festivals. It sparked birthday cakes, opened theatre curtains, and occasionally set off illegal fireworks in suburban backyards. It served the everyday and the extraordinary with equal indifference. But alongside its service came decline. Disposable lighters, cheap and convenient, began to dominate the landscape of ignition. They could be operated with one hand, even in wind, and lasted longer per unit of plastic. The shuttered, slowly, like old eyes closing. Some were repurposed. Others simply collapsed under the weight of disuse. A few, stubborn and soot-streaked, held on, producing limited runs for nostalgia, tradition, or religious ceremony. The hum of machinery softened. The whispered clink of drying racks became rare. In the United States, book matches lingered in bars and casinos, offering free branding with every burn. Collectors emerged, philomenists they called themselves, carefully archiving matchbooks as cultural fossils. Each design was a time capsule, a steakhouse now defunct, a club no longer dangerous, a beauty salon that once promised miracles with ammonia. The match, while shrinking in utility, grew in symbolism. It was no longer just a fire starter. It was a metaphor for romance, for danger, for rebellion. She's a real firecracker. He's playing with matches. Entire films opened with a match being struck, a sound sharp and soft, like memory being lit from below. Back in the gallery, we notice a box half open, its sandpaper edge worn by hundreds of quiet frictions. Inside, the matches lie shoulder to shoulder, like monks at prayer, or pencils in resignation. They are waiting, not impatiently, but knowingly. The faint creak of a display drawer sighs in the background. In this stillness, we reflect on the modest courage of matches. They did not demand adoration. They burned, then disappeared, content to be forgotten after serving. They were small gestures, each one an offering of warmth, light or defiance. To light a match was to make a decision, and to watch it burn was to surrender to time. Like a teacup balancing fog, we have not yet reached the match's end. There remain tales of design, of safety codes, of curious materials. There is still the rise of strike anywhere nostalgia, and the curious permanence of things that were never meant to last. The match had once burned with the urgency of invention, but in this next phase of its life, it learned to wait, not out of sloth, but out of certainty, like a cat already inside the room, curled into the corner with no interest in explanation. We now turn toward the slow evolution of the match's materials. The splint, wooden, always, was no longer left to chance, initially culled from whatever forests happened to be nearby. Matchwood became standardized with meticulous care. Aspen, poplar, and white pine were favored, not for their strength, but for their softness and predictability when split. These woods were gentle with flame, and took to slicing without splinter or protest. Forests whispered into factories, where logs were shaved into sheets as thin as old receipts. These ribbons of wood, almost translucent, were punched into narrow sticks and left to dry in great warm rooms that smelled of sawdust and faint ambition. The air there was dry, reverent, the hush of varnish and ventilation palpable. The soft settling of wood on a mesh rack breathes beneath this paragraph. Each matchstick was a miniature sacrifice, a sliver taken from a tree, destined to vanish in a curl of smoke. Yet the process was impersonal, industrial, serene. No tree was mourned individually, but the forest was marked all the same, in hectares felled to supply convenience. In a way, one might say, a matchbook is a quiet archive of vanished woods. Then came the heads. Originally laced with volatile white phosphorus, they evolved, chemically, ethically, into the safer formulations of the 20th century. This duality of head and strip meant safety. Neither could ignite alone. Together they sang. Even glue was carefully formulated, lest it interfere with ignition. In one case, an overly stubborn adhesive resulted in matches that would not light at all. Even when pegged, the batch was discarded, and for a brief time, entire towns sat surrounded by fireless sticks, like a choir whose sheet music had been printed in silence. In some regions, wax was applied to the wooden splints. This helped the flame travel evenly, not too fast, not too hesitant. The wax offered smoothness, a way for fire to stroll instead of sprint. Lighting such a match felt more like a suggestion than an order, like coaxing a candle to remember its purpose. The faint exhale of waxed paper folds into this silence. Factories fine-tuned the process like organists tuning pipes. Temperatures were calibrated. Humidity was controlled to the decimal. Drying racks were aligned by compass, so that airflow could move through like monks on procession. Even dust was swept with sacred caution. A single stray spark in the wrong corridor could transform industry into ash. Safety became choreography. Some match heads were designed for silence. Military variants, for example, were engineered to burn without flare. No hiss, no burst, no telltale smell. A match for the covert soldier, a whisper of fire tucked into woolen sleeves. These stealth matches were a marvel, though their true purpose was often lost on anyone who'd never needed to light a stove in secrecy. The barely audible tap of a wool sleeve on wood lingers. Elsewhere, luxury matches emerged. Restaurants commissioned custom boxes, sometimes scented, sometimes gilded. Matchbooks became event favours, bearing weddings dates, initials, or cryptic messages like "strike here for a good time." It was an era of ceremonial combustion. The object had transcended mere function. It had become a gesture, an accessory, a small performance. The match even entered superstition. In Nordic fishing communities, it was said that if the third match from a box failed to light, the trip would be fruitless. Others believed that lighting 3 cigarettes with one match was unlucky, a belief born not from mysticism, but the cold calculus of trench warfare. 3 seconds to light, 3 seconds exposed to sniper fire. Matches also served as measuring sticks of memory. Some held on to empty boxes long after the matches were gone, reluctant to throw away the last physical trace of a particular night, a particular hand, a particular flame. In this sense, matches did not merely burn, they recorded. The cadre carries a note of scorched paper and sentiment, and so the match, humble and replaceable, continued to evolve, not in radical reinventions, but in refinements. It became smaller, safer, more aesthetic. Its disappearance from daily life was not a collapse, but a fading, a quiet retreat, like low tide slipping away unnoticed. Yet in every drawer where one still sits, curled into a box half emptied, the potential remains. Fire, still sleeping in cellulose, waiting, not demanding. We will continue our exhibit soon, through late capitalism, cultural metaphors, and the quiet rebellion of nostalgia. But for now, allow the hush of ash and sulphur to close gently around your thoughts. The flame is not gone, it is only resting. The match, it seems, is always ready, but never rushing. By now, it has shed its status as a necessity and taken on the subtler role of artifact. No longer the king of combustion, it is instead a quiet aristocrat, retired, unhurried, watching as its younger, louder cousins spark with silicone and butane. A relic, yes, but one with exquisite A little too wooden, a little too flammable. The soft click of a lighter overshadowed the scratchy whisper of the match, yet the match did not vanish. Instead, it found other domains, in camping kits, emergency rations, and inside glove compartments tucked beside expired insurance cards. Waterproof matches appeared, sealed in tiny plastic tubes, promising ignition even in monsoons or melodramas. To strike one was to summon a kind of stubborn hope. The faint crinkle of waxed paper rustles in the display case air. Meanwhile, the matchbox itself became a collector's treasure. Designers and marketers, recognizing their fleeting reign, leaned into artistry. Boxes featured everything from minimalist logos to surrealist illustrations. An owl wearing spectacles, a match riding a bicycle, a rhinoceros mid-sneeze. Each design was a signal. We may be small, but we still matter. Like a teacup insisting on a saucer, even on a picnic. Entire cultures embraced the matchbox as canvas. In Japan, bars and bathhouses printed miniature ukiyo-e on matchbooks. In France, surrealist poets distributed lines of first one match at a time. In Eastern Europe, public health campaigns warned of disease and poor posture, all from the cover of something designed to vanish in smoke. The medium was ephemeral. The message endured. Of course, the economic logic was shifting. Mass market lighters could now be made cheaply. So cheaply, they were discarded after a single use. Plastic had arrived not as a material, but as a worldview. Durability was no longer the goal. Reproducibility was. The match's wooden soul began to seem almost naive. It decomposed after all. It did not shine. It carried no logo apart from what it borrowed. And yet, in this disposability, there was something profoundly modern. A preview of the present, packaged in sulphur and cellulose. The soft collapse of a worn matchbox echoes faintly. In literature, the match lingered as a metaphor, a flicker of memory, a beginning fated to end. Poets loved it. They tucked it into stanzas like punctuation made of fire. To strike a match in the dark became a stand-in for recklessness, courage, or love. It became a symbol for the things we do even when we know better, like juggling spoons during an earthquake. In cinema, the match earned cameos, a close-up of the striking, a pause, a face revealed in sudden light. It was theatrical, cinematic, a moment that burned brighter for its brevity. Directors knew what matches knew. Brevity does not mean weakness. The match had mastered the art of arrival and departure, and in protest movements, the match returned with sharpness. It lit candles at vigils, set fire to draft cards and effigies, signalled resistance in alleyways and across barricades. The match was not loud, but it was decisive. Its flame could illuminate or destroy, and sometimes both. In the domestic realm, the match remained loyal. It lit birthday candles, started fireplaces, and restored power to gas stoves during outages. There was always one box somewhere, usually under something else, usually half empty and dust-flecked. You didn't need it until you did, and then it always worked, unless it didn't, in which case you cursed it softly and tried again, like a stubborn drawer refusing to close. Even as sales declined, production did not stop. In Sweden, India, and Indonesia, factories continued, often by hand. Some were government-supported, others were simply too beloved to disappear. Children still learned how to light a match with caution and curiosity. A rite of passage, the transition from watcher to wielder. Safety regulations remained strict. The balance of chemicals, the angle of the splint, the friction strip's abrasiveness, each was inspected and fine-tuned. To make something so simple was paradoxically a complex dance of its willingness to vanish. It flares, it serves, it leaves no trace but a scent, sulphurous, sharp, almost sentimental. It does not linger for applause. It disappears before we can thank it, like a librarian shelving the final book just before the lights go out. And even now, in the quiet corners of modern life, the match lingers, not in necessity, perhaps, but in posture. It waits not to be needed, but to be remembered. The match has become an emblem, not of fire, but of gesture. The act of striking it is now ceremonial, almost poetic, like folding a letter no one will read. Its presence in contemporary design is subtle, yet insistent. High-end restaurants sometimes leave a matchbox on the bill tray, not to be used, but to be kept. The box is small, square, textured. Its colour palette suggests confidence in minimalism. Inside, the matches lie evenly spaced, heads aligned like choir boys. They are never intended to ignite anything but impression. They are business cards that smoulder. In galleries, matches have begun to appear as commentary. Exhibits line walls with framed matchbooks from vanished motels and defunct bowling alleys. Their slogans read like haikus of decline. Sleep well, exit, 14, free coffee. The typography is cheerful, but the silence underneath is thick, like a cough muffled in velvet. And so, the match is no longer just an object, it is a timestamp, a capsule of place and moment. Even empty, a matchbox contains something, the idea of a hand that once reached for fire, the faint scent of sulphur, like memory folded inside paper. In this phase of its evolution, the match begins to exist, more in metaphor than function. It is invoked in speech, more than in kitchens. He's the match that lit the fuse. She burned bright, but brief. They struck out. The object has become a verb, an idiom, a rhythm. It burns less frequently, but speaks more often. Still, there are corners of the world where matches remain indispensable. In regions with unreliable power, the match is not poetic. It is practical. Candles still wait beside beds, and cooking begins with a scratch of friction. These matches are less refined. Their boxes are flimsy, their labels loud, but they serve. They ignite gas, boil water, summon heat, and they do so without complaint. Even in urban centres, the match retains pockets of relevance. In rituals, in survival kits, in ceremonies, it is present where lighters fail or feel inappropriate. Lighting a memorial candle with a Zippo may seem abrupt, even vulgar, but a match, the pause, the rasp, the bloom, adds weight to the act. It allows the moment to expand. Survivalists, too, have re-embraced the match. Not just any match, but the so-called stormproof variant, coated in wax with heads the size of small beetles. These matches burn underwater, upside down, and in wind that would bend trees. They are the tank commanders of ignition, overbuilt, overprepared, oddly satisfying. One can almost hear them saluting before combustion. There is, even now, innovation in their design. Eco-conscious brands experiment with bamboo shafts, plant-based binders, and recyclable packaging. But these efforts face a paradox. The more advanced the match becomes, the more it resembles the disposable lighter. And so, in chasing improvement, it risks forgetting its own nature. Humble, temporary, silent. Some manufacturers have responded not with progress, but with regression. They produce retro matchboxes, hand-assembled, with letterpress labels and intentional roughness. These are not matches for lighting things. They are matches for placing carefully beside coffee table books. One might say they are curated flammability. In one corner of our gallery sits such a box. It is thick, almost luxurious, inside are longer than usual. Their heads are dipped in pale blue, like eggs wearing hats. There is no barcode, no website, just a small phrase printed inside the lid, light only what matters. Elsewhere, matches have entered digital space. Artists scan old matchbooks, turning them into NFTs. Some virtual cafes let you click on a matchbox to light a 3D rendered candle. It is absurd, yes, but so was the fax machine once. The match has always adapted, not by changing quickly, but by staying still long enough to become relevant again. Cultural nostalgia has ensured the match will not vanish completely. In films, it remains a visual shorthand for reflection. In literature, it's used to begin and to end things, often within the same sentence. Even in advertising, where brevity is gold, the single-struck match retains power. It suggests beginnings, risk, heat, life. And yet, what the match symbolises now more than anything is care. One does not strike a match carelessly. There is always friction, always pause, always potential for failure. It requires intention, and that intention is its last remaining dominion. In a world of automatic ignition and algorithmic urgency, the match says, slow down, touch, wait. There are people, yes still, who carry matchbooks out of habit. Not for smoking, not for preparedness, but because they like the feel, the soft rustle of cardboard, the slight resistance of the striking surface, the quiet click of folding it shut. To carry matches is to carry a tiny, controlled danger, contained, polite, reassuring. And perhaps in this softness, in this silence, the match has finally become what it always wanted to be. Not just a tool, not just a flare, but a flickering memory held just long enough to matter. And while the match continues to fade from daily life, it deepens in symbolic resonance. It has become a kind of relic, not of fire, but of presence. A small, flammable punctuation mark in the long sentence of human gesture. Its value is no longer measured in sparks, but in pauses. In certain rituals, the match still performs with dignity, lighting incense in temples, tapers in churches, or oil lamps at dusk. It is chosen precisely because it does not persist. A lighter hums, a match vanishes. The brevity makes it sacred. To light something with a match is to accept its temporary nature, and by extension, our own. And there is, increasingly, a quiet reverence among those who still use them. Not for convenience, there are easier tools, but for ritual and rhythm, and the soft-spoken dignity of slowness. One might say, using a match today is like writing with a fountain pen, entirely unnecessary and yet deeply satisfying, like brushing dust off a windowsill just to hear the sound it makes. Some artists work exclusively with matches. Sculptors fuse thousands into intricate lattices. Conceptual pieces involve viewers lighting one match at a time, illuminating a word on a wall, letter by letter. A single strike becomes a syllable, a spent match, a period. The medium is short-lived, the message strangely enduring. Elsewhere, the matchbox has re-emerged as a vessel for poetry. Tiny verses are printed inside the cover, revealed only once the matches are gone. If you've used them all, you needed this, one reads. Another, burn gently. Some things don't come back. These are not products. They are invitations to reflect, packaged in cardboard and glue. There are museums too, small, dimly lit collections of match ephemera, curated with obsessive affection, drawers full of vintage boxes, displays of promotional matchbooks for now defunct airlines, grocery stores, metamorphise them, these tiny bundles of intention, always on the edge of becoming something else. Meanwhile, in fire safety circles, the match remains a paradox. Safe, yet risky. Controlled, yet wild. Children are still taught its dangers. Never play with matches, the posters say, usually beside a cartoon fox or owl. And yet, the same classrooms light birthday candles with them. The lesson is not abstinence, but respect. In wilderness training, matches are still carried, waterproofed, doubled, kept dry inside pill bottles or foil. They are a fallback when technology fails. Lighters can jam, batteries can die, but a match, so long as it's dry, does what it promises. No more, no less. It's like trusting an old dog to find its way home. And there is something grounding in that reliability. It reminds us that simplicity is not weakness, that fire does not require screens, that sometimes friction is good. In a world increasingly built around seamlessness, the match insists on seams. It asks for effort, and in return, it offers warmth. Of course, matches are not universally beloved. Some find them messy, outdated, too ephemeral. Some dislike the smell, the splinters, the risk of failure, and that's fair. Not all things must be loved by all people, but the match, in its quiet way, continues regardless, unbothered, unchanged. It is, in this way, a kind of quiet, radical. In a culture that rewards persistence, the match disappears. In a market obsessed with upgrades, it remains unmodified. In a digital world, it is physical, tactile, unconnected. It offers no metrics, no data, no feedback, only fire, and perhaps that is its final offering, the refusal to be improved. The match cannot be made more convenient without becoming something else entirely. A button, a switch, a spark without friction. But then it would not be a match. The flame would remain, but the meaning would be lost. Here in the still gallery, we can sense that tension in the way the matches lie, angled slightly within their box. Heads waiting, splints aligned. They seem to know their purpose. They do not need to advertise it. Their silence is confidence, not neglect. A soft draft stirs the edge of an open case. The cardboard lifts slightly, then settles. Nothing burns, but the potential lingers. So the match remains, unobtrusive, unglorified, and yet uncannily persistent. Not through dominance, but through quiet ubiquity. One does not go looking for matches anymore. One simply finds them, often when not needed, in drawers between old receipts and batteries with uncertain futures, in pockets of jackets, long unworn, in old pencil cases, hibernating beside paper clips and erasers that smell faintly of time. And when found, they are rarely used. They are turned over, examined, perhaps sniffed with a faint smile of recognition. They are not tools anymore. They are triggers of memory, of texture, of a time when combustion had a sound, a whisper, a rasp, a flare. Not a beep, not a click, a whisper. Among designers and archivists, the match has become something of a cult object, not because it is rare. On the contrary, it is everywhere, but because it is stubbornly unchanged. Its form is fixed. Its function remains untouched by the gluttonous logic of feature creep. The match does not sink. It does not vibrate. It has no firmware. It only burns. It has, in a way, become a paradox of modern design, an object that is simultaneously obsolete and perfect. No one needs it, and yet nothing replaces it. It does not threaten. It does not promise. It merely offers, and even when refused, it remains polite. Collectors often speak of the match in hushed tones. They describe the feel of cardboard from the 1950s, the weight of exquisite short one, like a jellyfish learning to waltz. In certain hotels, especially those too expensive to explain, matches have returned as amenities. Not the rough, overprinted ones from decades past, but matches dressed in velvet boxes, with wax-sealed heads and a gold logo stamped so subtly it disappears in lamplight. These matches are not expected to be used. They are expected to be noticed. They are aesthetic winks, and yet, despite their design resurrection, they remain functional. Strike them, and they burn. The flame curves over the head in that familiar soft bloom. The wood darkens, curls, then gives way, and for those who do strike them, in a moment of rebellion or necessity, the fire feels different, more personal, as though it had to travel further to arrive. This is perhaps why the match remains beloved in stories. In novels, a single match can ignite a metaphor, a forest, or a plot twist. It can symbolize defiance, curiosity, or despair. She struck the last match. He lit the darkness. They watched it burn down to the fingertips. These are not just sentences. They are rituals in ink. In cinema, matches are visual punctuation, a flare of light in a dark scene, the sudden reveal of a face, the hiss that interrupts silence. The action of striking is inherently cinematic. It involves movement, texture, friction, and flame. A lighter clicks. A match performs, like a stage actor who never breaks character, even while burning. Even the failure of a match carries drama. The scratch that yields nothing, the sigh, the retry, is a performance of fragility. One does not become angry with a failed match. One becomes philosophical. Perhaps it was damp. Perhaps it was too old. Perhaps the universe has its reasons. The match, in failing, teaches acceptance. In academic circles, the match has found curious new relevance. Papers have been written on its semiotics, its role in capitalist rituals, its symbolic function in literature and media. There are theses titled Striking Modernity, the matchstick in post-war memory. One scholar even argued that the disposable match is the original micro-performance object, a term which, though comically specific, is not entirely wrong. For despite its modesty, the match asks something of us. It asks us to pause, to engage physically, to feel resistance, and then to watch as it disappears. It is an object that insists on being present and vanishing in the same breath, like a librarian juggling feathers during a fire drill. Calm, incongruous, essential, and there are still industries that rely on matches, not massive ones, but particular. Traditional cigar lounges, for instance, often prefer matches to lighters, claiming that the flame is softer, the aroma less intrusive. Religious sites, where open flame is sacred, still stock matches behind altars and shrines, not because they're better, but because they feel right. The camping world too, despite titanium stoves and solar lighters, still packs matches, backup matches, emergency matches, just in case matches. They are wrapped in plastic, kept dry, tied with twine. They are insurance against arrogance. They are the object that quietly whispers, you are still human and you may still need fire. In some places, fire bans have restricted their use. Matches are not illegal, but discouraged. In these regions, they exist more as keepsakes than tools. A reminder of a time when one could strike a surface and summon warmth. The match becomes a memory made of cellulose and powder, tucked into tins and held behind glass. And while these changes accumulate, the match does not change. Its design is so deeply resolved that it resists innovation. Attempts to reinvent it often feel absurd. There was briefly return then to our glass display. The matchbox lies open. Inside, 7 matches remain. The rest have been used, burned, lost. The heads of these survivors point in slightly different directions, as though eavesdropping. Their posture is curious but patient. There is no urgency here, only potential. One lies crooked, its shaft bent slightly, perhaps from pressure or warmth. Another shows a tiny stain, oil maybe, or ink. These imperfections do not make them less beautiful. They make them more specific, more present. Each match, though mass-produced, is singular once handled. The case itself is quiet. Light reflects off its plastic cover like moonlight on linoleum. The background hum of the gallery has faded into near silence. One might imagine the sound of breathing here, even if alone. The match allows for that. A moment where nothing must happen, but something might. And in that gap, that breath, the match fulfills its final purpose. It does not burn, it does not plead, it simply offers presence. In a world determined to accelerate, the match remains still. It waits, not for attention, but for the right moment. And if that moment never comes, it does not mind. It will remain ready, even if never used, which is, in its own way, a kind of flame. And even when it is never struck, the match shapes the space around it. A drawer containing a matchbox is not merely storage. It is latent readiness, an invitation waiting quietly. The match does not demand use to assert meaning. It asserts meaning through the possibility of use. It exists at the edge of decision, like a sentence ending in ellipses. Consider how few objects do this. A pencil begs to write. A door insists on passage. But a match, its language is conditional. If, it says, perhaps, only when. It is the subjunctive mood, made of wood and powder. There is a peculiar tenderness in the way people store matches. They are not thrown in with keys and coins. They are kept in corners, placed beside candles, positioned where hands can find them in the dark. This placement suggests a kind of care, a recognition that the match, though humble, is not neutral. It matters how and where it waits. In homes built before central heating, matches were guardians of warmth. They sat beside wood stoves, kindling boxes, pilot lights. Entire evenings began with their hiss. The match marked the start of stories, of soups, of winter evenings thick with steam. Lighting one was a threshold act, stepping from cold to comfort, from dark to glow. The faint rustle of wool sleeves brushing hearthstones lingers, and though many of these rituals have faded, echoes remain. Lighting a fire is still a moment. It draws focus, attention, the pause before the strike, the angle of the hand, the breath held back, then the rasp, then the flare, then the gentle tilt to transfer the flame, as if passing a secret between friends. In cities, where fire has been domesticated into bulbs and touchscreens, the match feels even more elemental. It is a reminder that light once required effort, that heat began with patience, that comfort came from friction, not firmware. To light a candle with a match in a modern apartment is to time travel gently. The resurgence of slow living, analog aesthetics, and tactile rituals has made space for the match once again. It appears in lifestyle magazines, nestled beside linen napkins and ceramic teapots. Create moments of presence, the captions suggest, but the match knew this long before it was fashionable. It does not create presence, it requires it. Certain perfumers have released match-scented candles, aromas that begin with sulphur and settle into cedar, ash and paper. These are not meant to mimic burning, but to recall intention. The idea that light has weight, that beginnings carry scent, that ignition, when slow, is a kind of fragrance, and still some resist. Some view the match as messy, unreliable, unnecessarily analog. These criticisms are not unfounded. Matches fail, they crumble, they ignite too slowly or too quickly. They demand service, angle, patience. But in these flaws lies their character. The match is not about certainty, it is about interaction. Among craftspeople, matches are still used to char wood edges, to light delicate flame treatments, to mark subtle transitions from raw to finished. The flame is small enough to control, quick enough to vanish, a tool for thresholds, a way to say, now it begins. There is also a cultural specificity to how matches are used. In some regions they are lit inward, pulled toward the body. In others they are struck outward, pushed away. Some people cup the flame, others hold it high. Each gesture says something about how fire is seen, as friend, as threat, as companion. In northern climates, matches often sit in entryways, alongside gloves and scarves. In southern ones, they rest near stoves, shaded windows, old fans. Their position in the home reveals their meaning. Ignition as warmth, or as signal, or as punctuation to a quiet moment of stillness. And when a match is lit in the company of others, it draws the eye. Conversation dips. The flare becomes shared attention. There is a universality to its glow, recognisable across languages, histories, generations. It speaks in light, not words. The act of passing a match from one hand to another, unlit yet full of promise, is quietly intimate. A gesture that says, I trust you with the beginning. It is the simplest of tools, and yet it carries ceremony. Even children sense it. Their first match lit is remembered, not for the fire itself, but for the moment of being allowed. And yes, there are dangers. Fires have started, forests lost, lives altered. But even so, the match remains, not innocent, but honest. Its danger is visible. It does not conceal combustion. It does not whisper safety where there is none. It shows you the edge and invites you to step carefully. In certain folk traditions, spent matches are saved. Not all of them, just some. From birthdays, weddings, storms. A jar of blackened sticks becomes a quiet archive. Each one represents a moment when fire was needed and given. A flammable diary with no words, only traces. There is, too, the strange beauty of a match mid-burn. The way the head crumbles, the colour shifts from amber to grey. The way the flame curves along the wood like a question mark unravelling. The brief moment when it seems suspended, as if unsure whether to continue or retreat. Like a jellyfish trying to read a map. When extinguished properly, between fingers, with breath, or against a dish, the match leaves a faint trail in the air. Not smoke exactly, but something softer. The ghost of intention. The hush after a whisper. The space where fire once was and is no longer needed. Even as we automate more, simplify further, digitize everything, we keep matches. Not out of necessity, perhaps, but out of reverence, for beginnings, for texture, for the tiny act of choosing to light, not because we must, but because we may. And in this permission lies their persistence. They do not assert themselves, they wait. And when chosen, they answer, gently, briefly, sincerely, not with noise, but with warmth. We move quietly past the next case. Inside, the matchbox is sealed, the label faded, the heads aligned, untouched. One could open it, one could strike, but there is no need. Its meaning rests in stillness, and even unopened, a matchbox contains motion. then vanishes, like a good sentence in a forgotten language. Not all matches are equal, of course. There are variations, tiny, subtle, but deliberate. The heads may vary in shape, some more rounded, others flatter, offering a different pace to the burn. Some are treated with resins or colorants that alter the ignition tempo, the scent, the hue of the flame. These differences are imperceptible to most, but to the hand that lights hundreds, tobacconists, restaurateurs, those who live by flame, they matter. Certain boxes even come with instructions. Strike away from body. Keep dry. For best results, store in a cool place. These cautions are not ironic. They are quiet reminders that fire, even domesticated, carries its ancestry. Wild, luminous, occasionally fickle. The match is not a toy. It is not a machine. It is a conversation with physics. There are ceremonial matches, weddings, anniversaries, matches with initials stamped in gold foil, matches wrapped in ribbon. Some come in metal tins, others in embossed boxes, made to be displayed rather than opened. These are not objects of use, but of gesture. They are lit only once, perhaps to ignite a unity candle or a memory, and then never again. The rest remain, like guests who never left. This is the curious contradiction of the match. It is disposable, but not forgettable. It enters lives briefly and leaves a scorch mark in memory. Not dramatic, just a trace. Like the indentation left by a ring long removed. Even in advertising, this paradox is embraced. A hotel may boast of its matches not as souvenirs, but as symbols. Strike a match, light a memory. Wherever you burn, remember us. It is absurd, and it is true. A match carries place, time, intention. It makes scent tactile. It transforms paper into presence. The striking surface, often ignored, plays its part quietly. Grained, textured, balanced between resistance and yield. Too slick, and the match slips. Too rough, and it snaps. Its composition, red phosphorus, powdered glass, adhesive, has been refined over decades to offer the right kind of difficulty. Not too much, not too little, just enough to remind the user that ignition requires engagement. And when the strike is perfect, angled, swift, gentle, the result is almost musical. A soft hiss, a visible bloom. The flame is not loud. It opens like an eyelid at dawn. It dances briefly, steadies, then leans. A match does not burn in a straight line. It curves, shifts, always slightly in response to unseen drafts. Like a librarian, glancing at a window she cannot close. This movement gives matches their character. A candle may flicker, a lighter may flare, but a match wavers. It breathes. It does not sustain, but it speaks in short syllables of light. Each match is a paragraph, each burn a footnote, ephemeral illumination, then silence. In some traditions, used matches are kept not out of sentiment, but out of ritual caution. To discard a burned match carelessly is to risk releasing its memory without guidance. Some tuck them into drawers, others bury them in ashtrays or sand. There is no scientific logic in this, but there is psychological sense. A match that has burned still holds shape, and that shape feels unfinished unless properly laid to rest. Certain artists have built installations of spent matches, thousands, blackened and curled, arranged in spirals or towers. From afar, they resemble cities after dusk. Up close, they are silent crowds, witnesses to ignition. Each one tells the same story, arise from the same shared physicality, the feel of friction, the arc of consumption. A match burns the way emotions do, quickly, brightly, then gone. Even the phrase, match, made in heaven, carries dual meaning. A pairing, yes, but also a flashpoint. Two things that when brought together, ignite. The match is both noun and verb, object and action. It is passive until chosen, then briefly unstoppable. In digital spaces, where friction is minimized, where buttons glide, where gestures replace clicks, the match reminds us that some things are better earned than automated. The slight resistance, the required angle, the time it takes to warm the fingers. These are not flaws, they are features of presence. There is a small box in the gallery, uneven, faded, stamped in a language no longer spoken. Inside are 3 matches. One is broken. One is missing its head. One remains whole. The paper of the box is soft at the corners, worn by touch. No one knows who used the first or where the second vanished, but the third waits, as if rehearsing. Its waiting is not forlorn. It is complete. The match has no awareness of purpose, but the hand that finds it might. And that hand, in striking it, becomes part of the object's story, not by adding flame, but by choosing the moment. The match is never alone. It needs the human. This perhaps is why we keep them. Not for fire, not even for nostalgia, but for the reminder that ignition is always shared, that light requires choice, that even the smallest spark comes from somewhere, and ends somewhere, and asks, in its own short voice, to be seen just once before it goes out. Which is why even a single unlit match, when found at the bottom of a drawer, carries weight disproportionate to its size. Not in mass, but in meaning. It suggests a story that could have happened, a candle that might have flickered, a page that might have curled at the edges. It is not failure. It is untapped purpose. This latent potential is the essence of the match. It does not improve with age. It is not a wine, nor a memory. It will, eventually, absorb moisture or lose its chemical edge. But, until that happens, it remains on the cusp. An object designed not to last, yet always poised to begin. Like a sentence hovering before its verb. In libraries of things, those quiet corners where objects are lent, not bought, the match is never present, too ephemeral, too combustible. But in a sense, the match belongs to everyone. It is public domain, ubiquitous, trusted. Its simplicity makes it communal, and in that simplicity lies a strange kind of democracy. Everyone strikes the same way. Some manufacturers still try to innovate. A match with a longer burn, a match that resists wind, a match dipped in scent or colour or cause, charity matches, commemorative matches, biodegradable matches in recycled boxes, shaped like books, cities, birds. But no innovation changes the core interaction. The object must still be held, still be struck, still be consumed. The match remains analogue in the deepest sense, not just pre-digital, but pre-mechanical. Its logic is entirely tactile. Friction, grain, dryness. No updates, no versions. It cannot be hacked. It cannot crash. It either ignites or it doesn't. It succeeds in one motion or fails in silence, like a magician who refuses to rehearse. In remote places, the match still reigns. Cabins, campsites, winter outposts, all keep them stocked in jars and tins and small wooden crates. There are systems. Blue tips for stoves, red tips for lanterns. Some are waterproofed with wax or sealed in foil. Others are kept in books hollowed out for precisely that purpose. A box of matches becomes a lifeboat in miniature. Those who have lived through storms languages speak of the match not with romance, but respect. It is not a symbol then. It is a tool, essential, not quaint but elemental. In wind and cold and dark, a match is less than enough, and still more than nothing. Its flame may be brief, but its possibility is vast. Among poets and children, the match takes on new life. It is drawn in margins, referenced in songs, whispered about in stories that begin once upon a spark. The match becomes metaphor, metaphor becomes comfort. It is never just wood and sulphur. It is light you make with your hands. The magic of striking stone against story. In old films, the match has iconography. A man lights a cigarette in the rain. A woman watches the flame reflect in her glass. A shadow grows behind the glow. There are tropes. The match that won't light. The match that lights too well. The last match. And there is always meaning in how it is used. To light a pipe, or a path, or a fuse, it matters. Even in comedy, the match holds dignity. It is not mocked. It may fail, it may be awkward, but never ridiculous. The sound of a match failing to ignite is funny because it is human. The way we try again, mutter, shake our heads, then smile when it finally catches. This is not slapstick, it is ritual, and yet, for all its cultural presence, the match does not self-advertise. It has no jingle, no mascot, no brand loyalty. It slips between names, countries, languages. It is known by feel, not logo. A brand of match may change. The match itself does not. There are people who collect only used matches, not the boxes, just the spent sticks. They catalogue them by burn shape, by scent memory, by moment. Some are snapped, some barely used, some twisted by wind or rain. These are not collections of things. They are collections of wants. Others build altars of matches, delicate constructions of geometry and combustion, bridges, temples, abstract forms. Then they film their destruction, a single match igniting the base, the flame crawling upward, like a question looking for its mark. It is destruction, yes, but also release. The match was always meant to disappear. Among survivalists, there is a quiet reverence for the match. Lighters are convenient, but matches are reliable in their own way. One knows when a match is dry. One knows how many remain. There is no hidden failure, no secret depletion. And in emergencies, this honesty matters. The match may lie, but never about itself. Even matchbooks, largely vanished, retain mystique. Found in used bookstores or antique shops, they are relics of places that no longer exist. A jazz bar in Detroit, a motel in Utah, a seafood restaurant in Oslo. The addresses have changed, the phone's disconnected, but the matchbook remains, holding an echo in its folded paper. There is a science to how matches burn. The ignition temperature, the composition of the head, the way oxygen wraps around the sulphur, coaxing flame into shape. Chemists have studied it, improved it, calibrated it, but none of this appears to the user. The match does not show its math. It burns as if by decision. That decision, of course, is yours. The hand strikes, the flame follows, the story begins, and it ends, always, in ash. Some burn slower than others. Some flare too fast. Some sputter, falter, reignite in defiance. But none escape the end. A blackened stem, a curled shaft, a scent that fades within minutes. All matches vanish, but not equally. What remains, sometimes, is the pause. The moment after the match is struck, before it is used. That second, soft, golden, suspended, holds something rare. Agency. It is not light yet, not heat, it is choice. And that, more than any combustion, Until then, it sits at the edge of ignition. The gallery grows quiet, not out of reverence but alignment. The match does not require silence but encourages it, as if preparing the air for something small and worth noticing. And what does it mean, truly, for something to be finished? The match, once struck, once burned, seems to suggest a definitive end. Its body blackened, its shape distorted, its purpose fulfilled, and yet it remains, not as tool perhaps, but as trace, evidence that something occurred. That fire, however small, once lived in this place. The burned match is not useless. It has simply transitioned from potential to history, from cause to effect. It can no longer light a flame, but it can recall one, and in that recollection it still offers warmth of a different kind. Some people keep burned matches in bowls, not cleaned, not sorted, just gathered. A quiet mound of memory where every stick points to an instance of heat. They are not sentimentalists, they are realists with reverence. Each blackened shaft says, here, briefly, there was fire. Ash is not absence, it is aftermath, and the match teaches this gently. When we discard it too quickly, we miss the opportunity to see what remains, the way the head curves into itself, soft and skeletal, the way the wood darkens unevenly, the faint dust it leaves behind, grey but not weightless. In some corners of the world, spent matches are composted, in others, burned in ceremonial piles, in a few, tossed into water as offerings, a gesture toward letting go, toward blessing, toward transition. The match may be mundane, but it touches myth. It belongs in its way to every ritual of light, and so it finds its place in altars and poetry, in science kits and novels. It crosses boundaries others cannot. It is both ordinary and exact. A match in Tokyo and a match in Tunis behave the same way. Flame has no accent. In many households, matches are stored near candles, not because they are used often, but because it seems improper not to. A candle without a match is incomplete. One implies the other, like envelope and letter. Together they form a small contract. Light when asked. This expectation is subtle, but precise. When the lights go out, we reach not for devices, but for the drawer. The sound of it opening, the soft shuffle of contents, the quiet satisfaction of finding the box, and then the pause before lighting, checking the room, the silence, the presence of others, as if confirming that yes, this is a worthy moment for flame. The lighting itself is never abrupt, it carries pace. The match is held, gripped softly. The box is angled. The strike occurs. One breathes in anticipation, never rush. The sound, so distinct, marks the crossing. Scratch, flare, bloom. It is a gesture of trust. And then, quickly, that gesture becomes decision. What to light, what not to. Whether to let it burn down slowly or shake it out early. The choices may seem small, but they are layered with meaning. To light a single candle with a match feels deliberate. To light several feels ceremonial. To light nothing, to simply watch the flame, it becomes meditation. Some allow the match to burn to its end, holding it carefully between thumb and forefinger, turning it as the flame nears the skin, feeling the warmth, but not flinching, letting it go only when it tells you it is finished. This is not recklessness. This is listening. Others extinguish quickly, with a flick or a puff, or a press against stone. The extinguishing is an act too. It has texture, direction, memory. The smell released is specific. Carbon, sulfur, resolution. A scent that belongs only to ends. A box of used matches carries more story than a shelf of untouched ones. It has chronology, geography, purpose. Each stick precision. In the museum's west wing there is a table, simple pine, scuffed. Upon it sits a dish filled with burned matches, arranged in no order. Visitors are invited to sit, to observe, to add one if they wish. A sign nearby reads, "What you lit is yours to leave." The bowl fills slowly, then empties, then fills again. No one keeps count. That is not the point, for the match is not an object of accumulation. It is not improved by quantity. Its value does not scale. It is best understood one at a time. One strike, one flame, one breath. To attempt otherwise is to miss the thing entirely. This singularity is its elegance. In an era of excess, the match suggests sufficiency. It does what it must, then stops. It refuses permanence. It resists legacy. It burns and disappears. Like a kind word whispered behind a closing door, its design affirms this. Small, uniform, simple to manufacture, but not crude. Economical, but never careless. There is geometry in its balance, chemistry in its restraint, philosophy in its finality. The match is not an invention, it is a sentence. And so we see them preserved, not for their novelty, but for their normalcy. Boxes behind glass, booklets opened to reveal dates, logos, promises. Some pristine, never touched, others half-used, edges worn, each one a bookmark in a chapter not recorded. The gallery air here is faintly smoky, not unpleasant, but suggestive. The kind of smell that lingers after guests have gone, after candles have guttered out, after conversation has dwindled to hum. The smell of something finished, but not forgotten. We pass a case with a single match, burned clean, placed on velvet. Its stick is bowed slightly, the head reduced to a pale smear. The placard reads, "Anonymous, Sweden, used once." That is all. And yet it holds attention, because it is not what was done with the match that matters. It is that something was. Flame, unlike most things, leaves no trace of itself, only its effects. The match then becomes the signpost, the witness, the quiet custodian of the ephemeral. It tells us that something happened here, something brief, but intentional. And what else do we ever really leave behind, except that? And even now, when so many have forgotten how often they once reached for it, the match holds its position, not by demand, but by habit's echo. It exists in drawers because it has always existed in drawers. It lives in jars on windowsills, tucked between forgotten lighters and bent safety pins, not because it is needed, but because removing it would feel impolite. No one admits to collecting them, and yet they accumulate. Wedding favours, hotel tokens, emergency supplies. A matchbox becomes a time capsule, a slice of someone else's yesterday stored within your today. When struck, it does not burn only itself, it burns expectation. And yet, the match was never truly a product of leisure. It was born from necessity, hardened by chemistry, refined through risk. It passed through the hands of factory workers, many of them young, many of them harmed by phosphorus exposure before labour protections had a name. Matches may be quiet now, but their history is not. They were once revolutionary. The ability to carry fire in one's pocket changed not only the habits of the individual, but the mechanics of industry, war, migration. The match lit lanterns in mines, kindled cook fires at rail camps, illuminated pages in wartime barracks. It was a portable sun, miniature but sufficient. Even as electricity spread, the match adapted. It was not defeated by innovation. It was absorbed. Matches lit pilot lights. They ignited gas stoves and heaters, and candles placed where wires refused to go. They continued not because they were necessary, but because because they were reliable, because one could always keep a box within reach. The same could not be said for infrastructure. Their manufacture also evolved, albeit slowly. Automated machines dipped, dried, struck, sorted. Quality control tightened, chemicals softened, safety grew, but the basic design remained untouched. Head, stick, friction. It could be made faster, cleaner, in larger numbers, but it could not be improved without ceasing to be what it was. Marketing, however, flourished. Matchbooks became billboards, matchboxes bore slogans, cartoons, images of monuments and menu items. They were handed out freely in cinemas, gas stations, diners. Some brands printed jokes on the inside cover. Others offered collectible series. They became, for a time, the most distributed object bearing print in the industrialized world, and most of them were burned before anyone read a word. This was not a failure of communication. It was its own kind of success. The match did not ask to be remembered. It asked only to be used, and when it was gone, it left nothing but the thing it had made possible: light, heat, change. Today, match manufacturing survives in niche pockets. In Sweden, India, Indonesia, Poland, factories still cut and dip and box. Some do so as heritage businesses, others for regions where matches remain primary. Some produce collector's editions, vintage reproductions, artisanal designs, matches too elegant to strike. These are not always meant to burn. Sometimes they are meant only to suggest burning. And still, the match has not become obsolete. It has become ambient, like the sound of wind outside a sealed window, present only when you choose to hear it. A tool no longer central, but never quite peripheral. A fallback, a gesture, a memory you keep just in case it becomes useful again. There are homes now built without drawers for matches, without fireplaces, without candles that are meant to be lit, and yet matches still find their way inside, carried in by guests, purchased as part of a scented gift set, slipped into kitchen bowls that have no other task but holding things we cannot bear to throw away. The match, in this context, becomes something stranger, a cultural reflex, a ritualized leftover. Its presence is no longer rational, it is instinctual. It completes a scene even if the scene has no function, like a doorknob on a door that no longer opens, like a bookmark in a book no one is reading. And even in their slow fading, matches resist irony. They are not mocked. They are not rebranded as retro novelties or repackaged with sarcastic slogans. They persist with dignity because they never sought attention in the first place. Their humility has protected them from ridicule, their silence from obsolescence. The matchbook collector knows this. Their shelves do not boast. Their boxes are not flashy, but each item holds an entire vanished place. A bar, a bowling alley, a barber. Places where someone once struck a match, not to remember, but simply to see. And in that brief light, something happened. A face revealed, a silence broken, a breath drawn. To burn a match is not to destroy it, but to complete it. A match unused is still a match, yes, but not yet fulfilled. It is a verb ask why. Not all matches are used for flame. Some are drawn as icons, used in tattoos, printed in logos, woven into metaphors. A single match is a powerful image, slender, fragile, powerful. Its simplicity suggests vulnerability, its function, transformation. Artists return to it again and again. The act of striking, the burst of orange, the pause before use, the decay. These are the bones of narrative. The arc of ignition is the arc of story. Beginning, middle, end. The match's plot, compressed. And here in the museum, the matches remain untouched, rows upon rows. Matchbooks open to half-used pages, boxes with worn edges, some still sealed in cellophane, others faded from time. The air around them smells faintly of dry paper and something older, something that remembers being fire. On display shows matches from a single year, 1962, all from different countries, each one labelled by place, not by brand. Paris, Jakarta, Johannesburg, Vancouver. The design changes, the size, the typography, but the shape does not, and the action never varies. In each, the head awaits friction. In each, the flame arrives the same way. What other object has travelled so far, changed so little, remained so ready? And though this concludes the long history of the match, its making, its movement, its quiet dominion, its presence has not diminished. It has simply withdrawn to the edges, not extinguished, just quieter, like an echo that does not demand reply.
And so the match becomes less a tool and more a question. Not one it asks aloud. Matches do not speak, but one it poses in posture. What is the worth of a thing that disappears as it fulfills its function? What is the value of presence when it burns so quickly into memory? These are not rhetorical thoughts, nor are they fully answerable. But the match invites them gently, not in the strike, but in the space after. The moment when the flame is gone and the air still smells of combustion. The silence between the light and what remains. Its brevity is not a flaw. It is the point. The match teaches us that some things are meant to be used only once, with care, that transience can be a design, that impact is not proportional to duration. A flame does not last, and yet it changes everything it touches. This is why matches remain in the quiet places of our homes, not only for utility, but as reminders, small reliquaries of intention. You do not light a match thoughtlessly. You must choose. There is no undoing, no pause. The moment begins and then moves forward. The match does not ask permission, but it does wait. It is this waiting that lingers in the mind, not impatient, not bored, but still, expectant. The match contains no urgency. It does not impose its readiness. It simply holds it. In this, the match becomes a symbol, not of flame, but of willingness, the potential to begin. There are objects we acquire to possess, others we acquire to use, but the match belongs to a third category, objects we keep to remind us of choice. It does not compel. It does not need to. Its presence is enough to suggest that we might still change the lighting, still change the mood, still begin something. Perhaps that is why it feels honest. There is no illusion in its design. It burns. It ends. It asks nothing and gives fully. The match is generous in a way few objects are. It offers transformation without seeking attention. It is humble ignition. In certain philosophies, there's the idea of the useful becoming invisible, that the best tools are those we do not notice. The match exceeds this. It is not just unnoticed, it is unpreserved. product behind, only evidence of use, and yet it is remembered. Not individually, no one recalls of Pacific matches, but collectively, in the gestures we inherit, the way we strike, the way we cup the flame, the way we watch it shrink, not with alarm, but recognition. The match shrinks like a moment well spent. There are lessons here, but they are not prescriptive. The match does not moralize. It does not offer metaphors with footnotes. It simply is. A singular thing, precise in its function, complete in its arc. It is its own punctuation mark. Even the spent match has presence, the char, the curve, the softness of the blackened tip. It becomes a trace, a gentle reminder that something bright once passed through here, that a beginning happened, that heat was chosen. In museums, we preserve matches not because they are rare, but because they are ordinary, because they were so frequently present that their absence now feels architectural. The drawer without matches is not empty, but it is missing a shape, a rhythm, a sound. The match, in this way, is almost architectural in memory. It frames moments, structures attention. It builds nothing visible, but everything experiential. A birthday, a candlelit dinner, a gas stove's flicker, a vigil, a protest, a whisper of warmth. We do not remember these events as matchlit, and yet they were. We remember the glow, not the ignition, the warmth, not the spark. But the match made these possible. It is the quiet part of the story, the prelude, the breath before music. And what is more human than to burn just long enough to leave something behind? This is not romanticism. The match is not a symbol because we have chosen it. It is a symbol because it behaves in a way that invites meaning. It vanishes, yes, but it does so having done its work. It offers a kind of closure we rarely allow ourselves. There is a quiet defiance in this. The match does not cling to relevance. It does not beg to be repurposed. It says instead, I was what I needed to be, and now I end. How rare that is, to burn, to vanish, and still to be remembered, not in name, not in artifact, but in the shape of gesture, the scent of endings, the warmth of beginnings. The match is not proud, but it is complete. In the museum's quietest room, there is no lighting. Visitors are given a candle and a single match. The flame lasts long enough to observe, to look, to linger, and then it fades. The visitor is left with darkness and memory. Some say it's disorienting, others peaceful, but most agree they left with more than they came in with, and perhaps that is the match's last gift. It does not illuminate forever, but it teaches us how to notice light, how to expect it, how to remember where it once was.
And in the end, the match is not about fire at all. It is about presence, intention, the grace of something that knows exactly how much it is needed, and no more. The match does not exceed itself. It does not linger. It completes its shape and steps aside, not with drama, but with certainty. This is its final lesson, not in heat, but in humility. The objects we forget to admire are often the ones that shape us most deeply. The hinge, the spoon, the folded paper, and the match always there, never intrusive, quietly preparing the way. It is the object that lets other things shine, the usher of illumination. We do not display it on mantles. We do not pass it down through generations, and yet it survives because it does not ask to be seen. It asks to be used. It is not heirloom, but companion. It remains close, small, patient, match has no future. It does not lead to efficiency, to progress, to improvement. It is not part of any strategy. It does not grow. It only ends. And in that, there is peace. A match gives light because that is what it is made to do. And then, uncomplaining, it is gone. Perhaps we fear this. Perhaps that is why we use other tools. Electric switches, refillable lighters, permanent light, controllable light, efficient light. But somewhere deep within, we still keep a matchbox. Not because we must, because we remember. We remember the scent of struck sulphur, the warmth close to fingers, the silence that followed, the curve of the wood as it faded. It is the sound that stays, the sound of the strike, the soft exhale of ignition, the moment it asks nothing and gives everything. And what remains is not flame, but gesture, the hand, the breath, the waiting. The match becomes not a spark, but a memory of sparks, a way of saying, I was here, I chose this, I made light once. It is tempting to overlook this, to move on, to switch on something brighter, but brightness is not always what we need. Sometimes we need something smaller, something quiet enough to carry, gentle enough to trust, and so the match endures, not because it is powerful, but because it understands the scale of its purpose, because it asks only for friction and offers only light, because it reminds us